not, they only finished paying back in 2010, which is incredible. So this is for World War One, and Germany sort of came back. They never really lost a war before this. They were united under Otto von Bismarck probably 100 years earlier. We had the Saxon region, the Prussian region. We had, what else do we have there? The Saxon, Prussian, come on, what's the last one? Bavarians, of course, they came together. And since then, they'd taken out the French in the Franco-Prussian War. They'd taken out the Austrians in the Austro-Prussian War. There's monuments throughout Berlin about this stuff. They'd never lost a war. And to come back from this, not only losing a war, but to be blamed for everything when there was other countries like Austria and Turkey, Ottoman Empire, and all these other countries that equally held the blame. You can even say there was, you can even say the other side didn't play fair either. They came back and things got hard. Oh, sorry, we just crossed the border then, by the way. Just saying. That's it, like that. How good's that? How amazing is that? Happy days. Happy days. But Germany coming back with its tail through its legs was not a good sight. It was very embarrassing for a lot of the people, and the recession that followed not that long after only made matters worse. Now, there are a few people that were really upset about this, particularly a young Austrian. Now, this gentleman, he tried to get into the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. 3 times he applied. He was born in Austria, and he wanted to be an artist, that's all. He had a few mummy issues and stuff like that. His dad was a bit interested, but he just wanted to be an artist. He wanted to paint these beautiful landscapes of the beautiful hills, the golden fields. That's what he wanted to do. He wasn't a good painter, it's rubbish. But the Austrian Academy of Fine Arts rejected him 3 times. They said no. They said no. So he's like, oh, okay, what the hell? So he went and moved to Germany after living a few years in Vienna and fought in World War One. He fought in World War One and he was gassed in World War One. Someone should have probably thrown more gas at him, but they didn't, and he found himself in hospital. He woke up in hospital and found out that Germany, his new adopted country, had surrendered. He's like, what? Why had they surrendered? Come on, like, I thought, I was believing in something here. I believed in something. I was following, my men were following, we followed this. And now they're just surrendering, going back. He came back out of hospital to a Germany that was struggling big time. They had to pay back the money. A lot of their male population had perished. A lot of the population that stayed behind was struggling to find work. The prices were extremely inflated. The cash, you couldn't buy anything with the money. The country kept printing money, but you couldn't buy anything with it. It was probably cheaper to use the money for toilet paper than actually buying the damn stuff. That's how bad it got. People had carriages, these small little trolleys full of money. The Reichsmark was not worth anything, or the German mark before that, sorry. It was worth nothing. So he felt like something needed to be done. Now, I talked about this earlier, but I'll just mention it again. So he came back and he needed work. Now, the only work that was really happening at the time, and like always, you can always rely on government jobs. Government jobs are the way to go. And he did. He worked for the German government as a spy. And we mentioned this, how he went to these to these German beer halls in and around Munich to spy on some of these new political parties that were starting to rise up. They were starting to rise up and say, hey, maybe it was the people that stayed behind's fault, the Jewish population, these Christians, these communists. These guys are the ones to blame. These ones stayed behind and didn't fight in the war, and it's their fault that we're struggling so much now. It's their fault that we're starving. And he latched onto this. He said, I agree. Screw being a spy. I'm going to join these parties. And he did. He joined these parties and rose through the ranks. And he really started to convince the people. He really started to convince the people that Germany, the great country of Germany, was once this huge empire. And it will be it again. He believed there were 2 empires already. He believed there was first the Roman one, then there was this kind of the Austrian Habsburg one, and now he believed that there will be a 3rd, even greater empire than those 2 combined. And he said, we'll get there one day. We'll have the 3rd Reich. We'll rise up, and the rest of the world will understand that we were born here, and we were made to be here, made to be in charge. And like, but what about all these other races and other people that live here? He goes, you know what? I've been reading into things. I'm fascinated by the idea of survival of the fittest, by natural selection. In this world, only the strongest will survive. Only the strongest people. And you know what? We're the strongest people here. The rest, they're going to have to bow towards us. And people are like, yeah. Sorry, these are not my views. I'm just sort of channeling the ghost of Adolf here. But yeah. he was fascinated by the idea of this natural selection, almost like a Darwinian society, where the whole idea of the strongest will survive. The people with the better qualities will obviously survive and pass these qualities on to others, onto their offspring, and then it will just get better and better and better. He believed in a master race, and this is what he sold. He wrote a book. He tried to take the government in Bavaria, but they locked him up. And for 9 months he was in prison. He was supposed to be in there for a lot longer, but he wrote a book called My Story. And in this story, about himself, he wrote about his life, but he wrote about the country of Germany. He wrote that this could be the greatest place in the world. This could take over the world, and their race could really stand up and really dominate the other races. The other races didn't need to exist at all. Not at all. They were nothing. They couldn't rise up the same way. He believed there was this perfect race of these blonde-haired, strong, blue-eyed individuals. They'd once ruled the world, and these other parasitic races had come up and taken over. And it was that was why they lost the war, and that's why this world was falling to ruin. And everyone was like, oh, maybe this guy's the point. I swear I do not believe this. I'm just trying to do what he said. I'll say how he was saying it. People were like, okay. And when you're down and you're struggling and you've got no money and you've got no food and you're hungry, it's not a nice feeling, but it's a better feeling, a justifying, validating feeling to blame someone. And that's what he did. He gave the people someone to blame. Whether it was the Jewish people, whether it was the Christians, whether it was the educated elite or the opposition party, he was brilliant at shifting the blame. It's not me, it's them. It's great to talk bad about people, talk bad about these people. These are the ones that did it, and people followed and went along with it. It's human nature to do this, and he really tapped into that. And he started to find some very, very big audiences. His political party, the NDSAP, the German Workers' Party, started to hire these people called brown shirts. These brown shirts start to go around, and anyone that sort of disagreed with him, they said, oh, listen, I don't like what this Adolf Hitler says and what this NDSAP party says. That's a bit rubbish. You can't, all races should be together. Maybe that night you get a knock on your door, and they'll say, hey, you've been talking bad about us. How about you look after your son over there? We've been seeing him going to school. You want him to come home tomorrow, don't you? Yeah, that's what you do after school. Yeah, we'll make sure you don't talk about anything else. Now, at first, these were just light threats. Eventually, it would get full blown, and there'll be the SS soldiers. They'll be coming to your door and taking the children away, or taking you away. If you were lucky, it was just you. Absolutely terrifying. But these brown shirts and this party grew in power. They grew in power, where Hitler eventually became Chancellor. Kind of similar role to what Angela Merkel is now, and after the resignation of Heindel, Mr. Hindenburg, he finally became Grand Leader Führer, as they call him. He rose to power, and the people voted him in. They wanted someone new. They needed someone to make a difference. Unemployment was rocking around 40%, similar to what Bosnia is. Incredible. People couldn't feed their family. They wanted a difference, and this Adolf Hitler man promised a difference. He promised he'd make Germany great again. He said, I will. Leave it to me. I'll make people work. I'll make sure there's no unemployment, which is kind of impossible, but he promised that, and he kind of nearly got it in a way. People voted him in, and he started building roads. He started building these roads. He started to build the armies up, even though they weren't allowed. The Navy, he started to build. The Air Force, he started to build. The rest of the world were like, hey, Mr. Hitler, you're not allowed to do that. The rules said that you can't build an army or navy up again. He says, but my people are starving. They need jobs. Please. And they listened. They said, oh, all right, okay, no worries. In the background, he's kind of still building up these armies. The roads we're driving on now, the Autobahns. Who built them? Adolf Hitler. These are his roads right here, right now in Germany. All the Autobahns were commissioned by him. And don't get me wrong, they're a fantastic set of roads. I wish he just set to public works and stuff like that, instead of trying to murder multiple generations of people. But his road building program was fantastic. His even just building program was fantastic. And the rest of the world looked on and said, this guy Adolf Hitler, he's got something going here. He knows what's happening. He knows how to get a country working. And as I said, in 1938, he got Time Magazine Man of the Year. Now, one thing about Time Magazine, do not always think that just because you get Time Magazine Person of the Year, it's not because you're the coolest person or the nicest person. It's just you're the most sort of significant, changing, moving and changing person at the time. But they thought he was great. You talk to people back then, they said, this guy's doing pretty well. This guy's going all right. What they didn't see was in the background. They didn't see this blame game. They didn't see these brown shirts slowly converted into SS soldiers going around and threatening anyone that spoke bad about this NDSAP party. And eventually they changed their name in the Berlin Olympics to the Nazi Party. Banners were down. There were little hints in the Olympics that things weren't right, particularly when Jesse Owens won the 100 meters, sorry, it was 400 meters, and Hitler refused to shake his hand. People were like, why? Yeah, because he's like, why? Why? Like, that's weird. Like, yeah, stuff like that. There was little things, but no one really noticed it back then. No one noticed. It was like, whatever. It wasn't until I mentioned the Reichstag fire, the German Parliament building burnt down, and a lot of people to this day, a lot of historians believe that it was maybe a member of the Nazi Party that did it, but no one knows. But Hitler came out the next day and said, this was an attack on me. This was an attack on me, and I'm going to ratify a new rule that anyone seen as a threat to the government can be detained and locked up without any human rights. And the people signed it. Parliament signed it, and after that, the second that was signed, he liquidated the opposition party. There was no more opposition party. There was just the one Nazi party. That was it. And anyone that stood up, anyone, as I said, teachers, poets, communists, Christians, homosexuals, anyone they thought as a threat was started to be rounded up and sent to labor camps. He finally started to move in on Austria. He'd had his eye on Austria for a long time, and the Austrians celebrated it. They were like, yay, this guy, look what he's done to Germany, he'll do it to us. Unemployment was virtually, like, it was nearly zero, like it was disappearing. Everyone had a job, so Austria was happy. You talk to people now in that main square, no one was there, but everyone was there at the time. The Czech people were like, we don't like this, we don't want to be a part of this. That Old Town Square where Jan Hus, where the ballet was, they were there with their guns ready to go. And the Nazis marched in, and no one did anything. They took it without anyone helping around the world. As I said, Neville Chamberlain and Stalin and stuff, they went in, and Roosevelt, they all went and had a meeting with Hitler after he took Austria, after he took Czech, and said, don't do it. As I said, Neville Chamberlain, even Pavel the other day, came back after this meeting and said, guys, we've secured a peace. Have you got Czech back? No. Have you got Austria back? No, but we've secured a peace. Neville, that's not how it works. You don't just go and tell someone after they've killed someone that's bad and then just let them go. No. You maybe, try and rectify the situation a little bit, but international diplomacy was very fine back then because no one wanted another war. No one wanted another war. Too expensive, too costly, too deadly. So they tried to keep the peace, even though this guy was starting to go a little bit off the rails. Poland were like, guys, we're in trouble here. We're in trouble. And the world finally got together and said, listen, Hitler, you take Poland, you march into Poland, and there's trouble. Now, at that same meeting that Neville Chamberlain said there was peace, Hitler and Stalin had their own secret meeting, and they signed what was called a non-aggression pact. They said, you know what? Let's take half of Poland each. Russians, you go in that way and we'll come in this way. How about that? That's exactly what they did. They invaded Poland. This was the start of World War II. They invaded Poland, but the world was not ready for just how quickly they'd advanced. They thought Germany was falling to pieces. Not when you got a slave labor behind you after 10 years. They'd built up tanks, they'd built up munitions, they'd given everyone that didn't have a job in the army. And they marched in to Poland first, and before they knew it, they went through Belgium in about a week. They went through Belgium. Belgium had this big fort on on this river, and they thought they'd hold them. They had a bunch of paratroopers land in there and took it. They took France in 6 weeks. France. The only one there that was saying to do something was a man named Charles de Gaulle. You probably have heard of this man. He was like, do not trust Adolf Hitler, please. And they're like, we built a wall. And they're like, you built the wall along the bloody road wrong way, the Maginot Wall. And he's like, no. He was saying, guys, this guy's no good. He was trying to warn people. I do have respect for him in that sense, but he did bomb the Pacific later on, so I hope Charles de Gaulle is sitting there with Hitler burning in hell. Ooh, that got political. Yeah, he thinks he's a good man. He burnt them he killed just as many people in marine life as Adolf Hitler, so I hope they're both having fun down there. I'm sorry, well, that got a bit deep then. Don't get me started on him. Yeah. So yeah, Charles de Gaulle was saying that, but yeah, I hope someone, I wish someone got him then just as well. Go ask the Pacific Islanders and stuff like that what happened to him. So France fell, and before the world knew it, France went down. Italy was under the control of a guy named Benito Mussolini. He'd brought this idea of this fascism where Hitler learned. He said, listen, how about the state is more important than the everyday person, and we all work towards the state. He brought this idea of fascism in. General Franco in Spain, the Spanish have been fighting a civil war after the abdication of the king for the last 10 years. The world was in, stuffed. No one knew what to do. The whole of Europe was basically either under a dictator or the German Nazi party had taken over. Oh my God! Before they knew it, within about 10 to 12 weeks, Europe was stuffed. It was so quick. It was so ruthless. And it was what they did in the countries that was so horrible. It wasn't just a bunch of soldiers going in and shooting each other. No! That was the easy bit. That was the lucky bit. If you just had soldiers going in and you got shot, oh good. It was the aftermath when the SS, the Schützenstaffel, the Hitler's secret bodyguard, these ex-brown shirts, when they marched in and looked for the threats. They start to round up the threats. You prayed you got shot, because if you're rounded up, you're either taken to these labor camps, or if you're the Jewish population, you're rounded up into these ghettos and then taken to an extermination camp. The world didn't know about this stuff, but that was the horrible part about it. Countries over the years have invaded each other. That's kind of normal in a horrible, sad way. But to actually go in and then systematically pick people depending on what they believe in or what they follow or who they've married to or what they do, and then murder them for that sake, that's very, very horrible. Like, it does happen around the world. It's so sad, and I don't know why. Few things happened after this that were kind of lucky, but in all honesty, we could have been in a very, very different world right now. The first one was that Hitler abandoned his plans to invade Saudi Arabia. He wanted to go down there because he needed fuel. He needed fuel big time. These tanks don't just run off air, and yeah, Europe only had a limited amount of fuel, so he did have plans to go down there, but he thought he'd secure Europe first because he was a little bit worried about who was looking over his shoulder. This was a man named Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was looking over, and I understand Hitler's point of view. He's probably like, okay, I think the Soviets are going to let me take Europe, and then they're just going to come and sweep them away. There's a lot more men. I've got to counterattack this, and he turned on Russia. Now, no one ever comes out okay after turning on Russia. Ever. Never. Napoleon tried it with 400,000 men, failed. Adolf Hitler tried it with a very similar number and failed. The Russians are just like, what, do you want to come here? Why? Oh, come along, wait for winter, it'll be lovely. Joke's on you, it's shit. They just burned any food supplies, destroyed any water, and the Germans just had to keep trekking into Moscow. They had to let their tanks run 24 hours so they didn't freeze. Men abandoned the convoys. They were just like, screw this, it's too cold, and a lot of them just died. The army did make it to Moscow, but the Russians held them back there, and he lost significant amount of men on the way and stirred a sleeping giant. The Soviets just descended on Europe, going and starting to liberate country after country. The Nazi party did not know what to do. Oh my God, it was scary days. You suddenly woke up this giant. It's like when you step on an ant's nest and all the bastards start coming out and crawling all over you. Like, that's exactly what happened with the Germans. Like, oh my God. The Soviets came in and totaled places. And it was a race here because the Allies on the other side were getting ready as well in D-Day, led by General Eisenhower and Winston Churchill. They were trying to get over to London, the Germans, on the other side, but Winston Churchill managed to rouse them up with his speeches and hold them back. They did do one last shot, one last counter-offensive where they parachuted in to the occupied France, and then the next day they launched the biggest invasion the world had ever seen on June 6th. They came on in and landed on Omaha Beach, Sword Beach, Utah, Gold Beach, and started to push back the Germans. Now, very lucky in the sense that Russia was on the other way, and what happened is this big kind of race to get to Berlin. Unfortunately, the Nazi party by now was starting to fall apart. Poor old Adolf couldn't keep everyone together. Eventually, the Allies and the Russians were racing to Berlin. It was a race to Berlin. The Reichstag, which was still in pieces, and the Russians got there first. Adolf Hitler was in his bunker with his wife. Well, apparently he married Eva Braun in his bunker, where he took a cyanide pill and then shot himself. The Russians just unveiled his skull again the other day. Now, no one really knows if this is it or not, but I kind of hope it is, as I said. So, you can go see his bunker. It's just a boring car park. You can't go underneath or anything, but it is still there underneath. Maybe there are talks of them opening it up one day. The Russians got there, and then they started their own occupation of these areas, falling into, I guess, what we call the Cold War. The Allies made it to Germany, and then they partitioned Germany into different bits. There was a bit for USA, there's a bit for the UK, a bit for France, and then the other side of Germany was for the Soviet Union. Germany fell to pieces once again. And this kind of opens up the whole new idea of the Cold War. And this leads us back to Nuremberg, when they start to round up these camps. And they're like, what are they doing in there? What have they been doing to these people? They thought they were prisoners at first of war. They thought they were soldiers. They said, oh, whose side are you fighting on? They're like, oh, no one. I'm just a electrician or something. They're like, what? I'm just a baker. Well, why they locked you up here? Oh, because I'm Jewish. They're like, what? What? Or because I'm gay. Like, what? They put you in here? Yeah. Really? The world didn't know about it until these soldiers start to liberate the camps. Until they liberated the camps. They're like, you're kidding. And this is when these trials started, particularly in Nuremberg, and these, it was on the news and yeah, you can read in the papers and stuff like that. So if anyone is interested in that, by all means, go check it out. I won't touch on the Cold War because that's another big long story itself, good stories in Cuba and stuff like that. But yeah, I hope that was interesting. I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of just what happened, and it might help you, particularly when you walk through Nuremberg, if you do and are interested in the Palace of Justice.